Hey everybody, Crocilla here, and I wanted to talk about a very common myth that's propagated in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Not the myth that a small person could beat a bigger person, the myth that you don't need to do anything besides Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in order to be good in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The myth that you don't need to lift weights or strength train in order to be effective as a martial artist. It was a dangerous myth that was very popular a few years back. I feel like it has been dying out, but my hope is we put the nails in the coffin today with a pretty effective video. I brought in my friend Max Barnhart here, biggest yoke in the jiu-jitsu game. He'll tell you a little bit about himself and why he's qualified to weigh in on the conversation.
How you doing, guys? Max Barnhart, Division I strength and conditioning coach for the past 7 years. Going to be 8th year this fall, and a purple belt of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, studying here under Steve and Mark at the Park Slope Academy of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
And even before that, Max and I have trained together in previous schools. And the nice thing is I know of his training for a long time. I know he's been dealing with injuries. I've been dealing with injuries when it comes to my personal training, and almost to the point where I had to stop jiu-jitsu. My ultimate goal is not to be Branch Warren or Frank Zane. My ultimate goal is to be a successful grappler, and that means training every day and teaching every day. And the big component of that is doing jiu-jitsu in a healthy way and not having to do a week of jiu-jitsu and 2 weeks off. So I've been dealing with cosmetic injuries, whether it be cauliflower ear or torn philtrum, black eyes, broken fingers, broken toes, all that stuff. But the more serious injuries like 400 discs in my lumbar spine, as well as a torn right ACL, a torn right MCL, a torn right meniscus, and torn left ACL, led me to have both my ACLs replaced with cadaver ACLs, or actually, for that matter, cadaver Achilles tendons. So they are stronger than normal knees, but the rehab was pretty long, and I almost lost a full year of training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Coming back from back-to-back surgeries and back-to-back PTs, my gait was very off, and I think that compensation really tweaked my back. And when I first came back, I tried to hit the ground running, and it got me left in the bed pretty quick. So successful strength and training with Max, as well as a much more relaxed training schedule in the beginning, also coupled with some sports injury massages, have helped me get back to training not only now, but also feeling better than when I did prior. So I'm very happy about that. Max could definitely tell you a little bit about some of the things to consider as a grappler who wants to strength train as well.
Yeah, well, when designing any program, one of the first thing that you have to take into account really is that what we're doing here in the gym is secondary to your primary endeavor, which is jiu-jitsu. You want to get on the mat and you want to grapple. So that will dictate your sets, your rep count, the management of that volume and intensity to overload, and really to what degree that you grind yourself out prior to being on the mat. And then second consideration in program design would be sites of injury. Steve attested to all the things that he's gone through just to get back on the mat and earn his blood stripes. And, me as well, having a labrum that's torn in 2 spots. I need a clavicle to probably be shaved down, fractured rib, disc herniations in my lumbar on 3 occasions, I believe. These are all things that you need to take into account as the third consideration, which is your sites of injury. And in designing Steve's program, that was probably the overarching point, I'd say, of each day. And the sets and reps and subsequent intensities also. We knew that Steve was coming back from dual ACL replacements, and his lumbar, maybe as a means of compensation as well, had just become so jacked up. So that dictated our exercise selection. That also dictated, what parts of the body we're targeting at first and how we're targeting them. And so really it became a progression of working your upper body only because he's still doing the rehab for his knees. And then progressing him towards starting to, bridge and use that posterior chain and the lower body in general. And I'd say the fourth consideration and the last consideration as a general principle is just what are the demands of your sport. And in jiu-jitsu, we have to look at not only like the sites of injury, but what will propel your game on the mat. And we know for sure if we're starting from the neck down, the neck is the first one. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we harp on here. And you do a couple sets of 100 with, I'd say, band resistance on a neck harness, which is one of the best ways to develop the yoke. And the yoke referring to the neck, the traps, upper back, rear delts. And the neck is so important not only for absorbing impact, God forbid you plant on your head, but bigger neck, harder to choke.
Yep, and harder to break down posture-wise too.
The posture, in the clinch, the posture is huge, whether you're in someone's guard or you're standing, whatever the position may be. And then going to the traps. The traps are huge because, just like you said, posture, and also protecting the shoulder girdle. And we know that the shoulder is very susceptible to injury. It's the weakest ball and socket joint we have in the human body. But on top of that, we're talking about Kimuras and key locks here. We're talking about
day one jiu-jitsu.
Day one jiu-jitsu stuff that can really do a lot of damage. And also just constant rolling on that joint to replace guard, so on and so forth, are all things, even when you're bridging. It's a lot of pressure on that joint. And then, in my opinion, in combination with the neck and the traps, the back is the biggest thing. That should be your biggest concern along with the legs. Forget chest day. Forget arms. Your arms will get developed, as a side note, doing back and doing lower body. Your arms get bigger because of the release of testosterone. But working what you can't see is what's going to propel your game. And those are things, I'd say, the major considerations that went into designing Steve's program. Specifics that I could kind of get into without going on too long of a tangent would be the work-rest ratios in jiu-jitsu. If you're trying to design conditioning, let's say, I won't go too deep into it, but we know that with the limited research on grappling arts, it's about 3 to 1. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing a minute of work, really what's happening is 45 seconds of that is all-out exertion, and then you have 15 seconds to rest. Now, regarding other ratios within strength and conditioning, especially in Steve's program, the pull-to-push ratio, it's going to be 2 to 1 or 3 to 2 sometimes. As long as you're pulling more than you're pushing, you're going to be protecting yourself. And additionally, I'd say take a look into Prilipin's chart if you're trying to design your own program. That's really one of the foremost ways that strength and conditioning coaches at all levels of sport manage their athletes' training intensities and volumes. Aside from that, the last piece of advice I really harp on is avoiding the amount of extension at the elbow within the weight room. In jiu-jitsu, we're extending enough, whether it's a cross-arm Toriando, or I'm posturing, or I'm getting hyperextended in an arm bar, or it's internal and external rotation with the different locks, or just defenses. You don't need to bench press or do dips or push-ups as much as you really need to do rows, as much as you need to do shrugs, as much as you need to do bridges, deadlifts, and squat variants. And the last piece of advice I'd say, unless you have any other questions, Steve, is just avoid loading the axial skeleton. All right, so if you are going to do squats, I would probably prefer it to be a Bulgarian split squat variation. And with that said, that would be my general considerations for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu strength and conditioning.
I think it's a lot to digest for someone that's new to weightlifting.
Yeah.
I would say I consider myself a white belt when it comes to weightlifting, and where Max would be a black belt.
I promoted you to blue.
I'll take it. I'll take that promotion. I put in my time and my sweat and my reps. Updating my training log regularly. But I think it's an important thing to be doing something. For example, to go through my work on Mondays, we do a little bit. And I know Max is saying how don't do any bench, but that's not what he means. He's not saying avoid it completely, because for us, I do floor press on Monday with the barbell. Then I do push-ups, and then I do over one arm dumbbell floor press as well. And then on Tuesday we work on back, and then on Wednesday we're working on shoulders. And for me, avoiding my lower back right now, my legs, is what I'm doing. Of course, if you're working full body, you want to be hitting a little bit of everything. But the nice thing about what I'm doing now and what I didn't do when I was younger is not overloading myself too much. And by that I mean not hitting 12 exercises for one thing. I'm doing 3 simple exercises. It takes about a half an hour to complete, and by the end of that half an hour, I'm still able to train in the evening. Mind you, I also train in the afternoon. So I don't want to not be able to do jiu-jitsu. I don't want to not be able to sit on the toilet. I don't want to not be able to reach up and grab something from inside the fridge. So it's important that we don't do too much and get too overzealous. And I would say the same thing goes for jiu-jitsu. You don't want to come out and do 10 rounds out of the gate if it's your first day. And for us, we're not supposed to be doing thousands of reps, even if you're excited. And this is where somewhere that Max's expertise is like, hey, you did good today. We're going to cut it today and move on. Wait till next week when you're ready for it. So I think the big thing that I took away from my training now is successful strength and conditioning is the best tool you could have for jiu-jitsu. I think it's a great tool for anything we do, but in order to do jiu-jitsu effectively, safely, long-term, you can't avoid it. There's no way. It was a myth. It was wrong. The people that were saying it had to retire. The people that were saying it were actually doing it anyway. And don't believe the hype. Get in the weight room. You don't have to be there hours, but hit it and hit the ground running. That way you're keeping yourself safe.
It's also important to note that you mentioned the 3 pressing movements that you do, which may sound completely contradictory to what I was promoting, but that's because Steve's program is upper body strictly right now.
Yeah.
All right. So if you got a guy who can only work out upper body but is hungry 5 days a week, we got to figure out a particular way to feed him. And so with Steve, we do have that push day, but it's again managed. The volume is managed. It's kept low, and that's one of the most important things you can do. Now, like he said, if you're doing something where you're not restricted by injury, that press ratio is going to come down, and make sure it does.
Yeah, man. And if you have any further questions, we're always available. Both of us have a YouTube page. Max is under his name at Max Barnhart. Mine, of course, if you're watching the video, you're already here. And if you have any questions, you can definitely email me. If it's a question for Max, I can forward it over to him, or hit him up on his page again at Max Barnhart. That way we can give you some more information, and we'll be back in the future with some other videos. All right, good luck.